Hello, I'm Geraldine Doog. Welcome to Compass. In the West, I think many of us still have a fantasy of technology creating more rather than less possibilities in modern life, in terms of opening up more time, more contacts. In fact, there are strong counter-arguments tonight that technology is helping us hide from each other in order to seek refuge from the real world, so that we retreat behind virtual walls of video cameras and computer screens. The third and final part of our series, Visions of Heaven and Hell, proposes that technology is pulling us apart and creating a new world of the information rich and the information poor. Another example, Singapore, a most advanced technological society where the future is embraced enthusiastically. Yet you couldn't really say people have been set free. It's arguably one of the more repressive societies in the world. So tonight, a warning, even a contemporary prophecy, that in our headlong rush into the arms of technology, the future in 20 years' time could be full once again of hierarchies, of people in rich, technologically advanced cities sitting amidst a sea of the poor and the excluded, in a virtual wasteland.
Technology itself is neutral. It's a power for good and a power for bad. For instance, technology unites us. We are all citizens of one world to a much greater extent. But at the same time, it's making us all unequal citizens of that same world, because those of us who rejoice in the technology and use it and can make it an asset which gives us wealth and freedom and choice will be few, I think. And there will be many who will find themselves, in a sense, impoverished by the technology because they get left behind and they can't keep up with it.
There's such a tragic difficulty here because the inequities and the cruelty that exist in the way our species deals with itself are likely to continue. Ultimately, we are simply these mammals. We're very flawed. We have our pecking orders and our violence, all of these things, and they won't go away. They're part of our identities. In many ways, we view technology as something that is a panacea. And to a certain extent, that's true, but what actually happens is it simply amplifies our own nature in an ever greater way.
In the year 2020, we will have a world dominated by the wealthy people of the most rich cities of the world, and they will represent 1/8 of the world population. And they will be dominating over 7/8 of the world population, who will be considered like second class, third class, fourth class citizens. A world of division, a world of disconnection. This will be the world of 2020.
Once we talked of civilization. We claimed it was the goal, the grail of our endeavors. We dreamed of a future where we would all taste the sweet fruits of technological progress. But now, as we stand on the edge of another 1,000 years, we have no common dreams. There is a howling gulf between the future of our fantasies and the real world we are creating. When the world around us is full of discord, technology provides us with a choice. It can offer us distraction from the truths we dare not face, or it can be a force for good. It can help us heal ourselves.
That's my hand in the world as I move it around. That actually becomes our method of interacting with the environment. You can see I'm currently in the operating theatre environment. That's my virtual patient there. I can actually affect 3 different types of apparatus within the world. This one here is the patient's drip. I can alter the solution that's being fed to him. I can pick a particular drug and alter its dosage. That all then gets fed into the patient's physiological model. We can also affect the gases that he's breathing: oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide. The system we're running on today is actually based on a PC. It won't be too long before you can go into your high street shop and buy the VR kit that we're actually using today and put it into your PC at home.
We are creating new machines with a power we barely understand. Now is the moment when we decide what use of them we will make. This is good technology, and soon it will be cheap. But this is not the image that is sweeping us away. The evangelists of the future have something else to sell. Something far more basic, more profitable, and plain.
I'm going to be giving you some examples of the work that Microsoft is doing in the area of interactive television. What I'll bring up here is an example of a traditional music video that you might see on any music channel that has been enhanced to add certain selections that you can make as the video is playing. We can, for example, order tickets for an upcoming concert. We can order a copy of the CD, or we can press the lip sync button, and the lyrics for the song that we're listening to right now are displayed along with the video. Let's talk about the time frame. When will this all happen? We're beginning our technology trials right now in the United States. As those are completed, we'll move out across the rest of the United States and into the world, and we anticipate that within 5 to 10 years, these services will be widely available around the world. And that will truly be an exciting time, because these application ideas and many, many others will make the promise of interactive television come true, and everyone will insist on having their own interactive television.
We are being sold a vision of an information age, where we are connected to each other in an endless web of data. The technologists believe this is the key to our salvation, for each of us to play a part, to join the revolution.
The value of this new information system only works if it's in very wide-scale use. Just like newspaper or TV, it can't fund itself if it's only appealing to the top 10%. And so we have to make it easy enough to use and inexpensive enough and exciting versus all the other alternatives enough that we get, say, every household that actively watches TV to get involved here. Now, just like TV or telephone, there will be people who, for financial reasons or other reasons, decide not to participate. But we've got to get to the majority of society, or else we're just not achieving the potential of the system. Pervasiveness is part of the design, and without that, we've failed.
Everybody thinks it's like technology is the answer, like science is the answer, you know, and it's like, it's not, and we should know already that it's not. We've lost religion, we've lost, you know, so many things because we look to science to explain everything to us, you know?
I think it makes us as people lazy, you know, because scientists are so caught up and technologists are so caught up in, you know, wondering if they could. They don't stop to think whether or not, you know, should they, you know, continue in creating all these things. And therefore they just go crazy and create things that we have no use for, really, you know, other than for pleasure, you know, to be lazy, you know. See, I'm here complaining about technology. I'm walking around with a digital watch, a beeper, a bank card, electronic portfolio. You know, everything I carry is electronic, and I'm here bitching and beefing about the future, you know. But you know, it has its ups and downs, but it's enough to drive you crazy because sometimes you just want to say, okay, stop. You know, it's going too far.
You see these commercials showing the new technologies like You Will and the company that'll bring it to you. I won't say any names because we're not. But anyway, that's not to like show people how exciting and great the future's going to be. That's to sell stock in their own company. And I mean, they're not doing this to make the world a greater, better, more equal place. They're making it for money. If there was no money in the, if like people decided that money was going to be in butter churns and not like supercomputers, they would be selling butter churns.
It's money and it's power too, though. I mean, imagine, okay, you have 100 channels on your TV.
And they can manipulate it.
When you do, all you've got to do is press OK. And it will automatically insert that particular contract.
I was visiting the Maasai warrior in Kenya recently with an anthropologist friend. And, well, what the Maasai village normally do is they have thorns around themselves and they bring them together at night to protect themselves from animals. This particular village had an electric fence, but they were miles from electricity. They had solar cells up on the roof, and they were collecting this, and they were using that to generate enough power for one tiny little light bulb so they could read at night, and for an electric fence to protect themselves. That's what's actually possible, because solar power is really remarkably sophisticated, but it's cheap. No way could they have ever brought electricity in or gasoline to run a generator. Put a solar panel, next they'll have a telephone generated by that same solar receiver. So I really think there's some dramatic changes coming about for the poorer people as well as for the richer.
DIS button. It'll take a still shot.
The technologists are on a mission to the world to give everyone the benefit of information products. They want us all to be consumers in the market of the future.
The objective needs for a new technology are that technologies have a tendency to justify each other. So for instance, you have a very fancy computer, and then because you have that, somebody designs software for it that lets you make very fancy documents, but then because of that, you need a nice fancy home printer that can print the documents, then you need the fancy network that can connect to other people to print the documents. But the ultimate question is, when all of this technology is available, are people really doing anything different? And the answer is, they're doing something that might be more fun, more beautiful, but the world is still turning in the same way. There's not a fundamental difference, such as a disease that's been cured or a population that's nourished that was not before, something of that kind.
A digital tidal wave is sweeping across the world. It will soon have left its debris on every foreign shore. And the technologists may then feel their mission is complete, that information is universal, easy to use and cheap. They will say we now have access to their new kind of world. But though we may be taking part, they will set the rules.
I mean, I get as excited as everybody else about the visions of the future that are conjured up, that we'll all be united in this sort of global village, which will all work on behalf of, you know, greater good. But I think we can look at the past and see what other technology has done for us. I mean, when video first started, it was going to, you know, free us from huge media conglomerations because we were going to make our own films. It was going to be a two-way process. I mean, I don't know if people remember all this, but it was going to revolutionise our lives. And we ended up with Jeremy Beadle. We ended up with a machine that just fits into the domestic setup and doesn't really disrupt very much. So I am a bit sceptical about it because it's a question of who owns it and whether they're going to work on behalf of the public, if you like, or work for themselves. I mean, this idea that we all actually own it is a lovely utopian idea, but we don't.
Owning a piece of technology does not buy us control of our lives. Though we are told we all can go on the information highway, the reality is more pedestrian, more familiar and cold. Most of us will just receive. We will passively consume, because we do not have the power, the knowledge, or the means to move into the fast lane, to join the ones who shape the new.
When the riots were on in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, I was struck by an image of looters running out of a Radio Shack with Walkman and boom boxes and whatnot. The Radio Shack was completely trashed. It was next door to a Macintosh dealership. The windows were unbroken and you could see the power books in the windows. And I thought it's kind of worrying. These people don't know what that product is or why they would want one. So I think the split between the people who have this information technology and those who don't is very worrying if it falls along the traditional lines of have and have not.
You have to have literacy skills, you have to have numeracy skills, you have keyboard skills, you've got to have the financial resources, you've got to be able to make these gizmos work, and there's got to be the infrastructure, of course, in place, sometimes provided by the private sector, sometimes by the state, to actually, be able to do the business. So I'm afraid I don't see the information superhighway as being something which is going to reintegrate the world. On balance, I think it's going to tear it apart.
Where technology is at work, where it generates new wealth, it will grow and change and flourish and benefit its owners. But where technology is passive, where it is tuned just to receive, its presence will be blank. It will not set anyone free. This is the new apartheid. Apartheid not just between white and black, the rich and poor, but between those that seize technology and those that it ignores.
Today, in Africa, there are less telephone lines than in the only city of Japan. In Africa, there are 580 million people. In the city of Tokyo, there is only 23 million people. In Tokyo, there are 3 times more telephone lines than in all Africa. What we are doing now with the telecommunication and new telephones, we're going to invest more and more in Tokyo, more and more to build up new ways of doing telecommunication in Tokyo, and we don't invest any single penny in Africa. Because in Africa, there is no solvable market. People say, there's no money, why should I invest in Africa? Because technology is creating more and more poverty, while creating more goods, more services, the major consequence will be at the global level, the emergence of a cleavage between the world of the integrated. Those regions, countries, social groups are integrating them between themselves the more and more, and these armies of excluded people in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, in Europe, in North America, and including in Japan.
The story of the 20th century has been one of extraordinary technological change. And what's happening at the moment is you've got the technological change superimposed upon a massive deregulation of the labour market, the world of work, and actually the world of finance. And it's those 3 things interacting. The free market in finance, a free market in work, is being superimposed upon technological change in a way that hasn't happened in the 20th century. And it's that, actually, that confluence, which is so bewildering us and transforming the structures in which we live.
market of money, which means market of capital, market of money, where people can go and buy and take money, is now instantly managed through information communication technology. Today, while we are talking together, there are $1,200 billion which can be moved across the world instantly, just in a tenth of a second. This fact gives to the financial people an enormous power, far stronger than the power of the national authorities, of the nation states. London is making alliances with Hamburg. Lyon is making alliances with Barcelona. Los Angeles is making alliances with Osaka. And they don't pass any longer through the national government. This is the emergence of a new power localized in the cities.
The world may soon no longer be a group of nation-states, of countries with large and rambling edges. It may instead become a host of information centers, of little city-states that are powerful and determined. These city-states would deal in information, the one resource that requires no space and generates itself. They would be built for those who find comfort in technology's cold embrace. A small band of modern citizens living at arm's length from the poor. If the future looks like anything, it looks like Singapore. This is the technological city-state, the 21st century fortress town.
In an age of nation-states, Singapore was at best an oddity, which somehow survived despite the odds against it. But the world is changing in a very profound and a very dramatic way. And curiously, it harkens back to, let us say, Europe before the age of nation-states, when you had many cities and principalities, all linked to one another by a network, but each retaining its own identity and some control over its immediate circumstances. And the world is becoming like that.
Singapore calls itself the intelligent island, more committed to the future than any other country. Less than 3 million people taking on the world.
I think technology has been very much at the heart of Singapore's entire strategy for survival as well as development. And we may not be the most technologically advanced country in terms of having nuclear technology or being able to send the man to the moon and so on, but we emphasize technology because it is virtually the only resource we have. And because Singapore is a city-state, we have an opportunity to make this a microcosm for what other cities in the world could become in the future.
There are no homeless, there are no poor, there are no unemployed. The information highway flows right through, and everyone has a role.
We envisage that within the next 10 years, we would have an advanced national information infrastructure, which will comprise high-speed wired and wireless communication links that will connect up virtually every home, every office, factories, schools, libraries, and people on the move.
Your attention, please. Passengers are reminded that it's an offense to smoke, eat, or drink in MRT stations and trains. The offense carries a maximum fine of $500. Please help us to keep the MRT stations and trains safe, clean, and comfortable. Thank you for your cooperation.
This is the city as machine, and everything within it, from the people to the hardware, only has one function: to make the engine purr, to keep it racing forward. It's a hymn to automation, a showground for computers, a model of efficiency, a robot without a soul.
Singapore is using technology to organize the way people live in a modern city-state. One example is the area licensing scheme that we have in Singapore. The fact that people are going to be constrained from entering into congested areas, and it is not to be assumed that motorists have free rights to go wherever they want to, that there will be a social cost to this. We're now experimenting with electronic road pricing, which I think will come about very quickly. So it's not just technology, it's the whole idea that when you live in such close quarters to each other, there's got to be constraints on human behavior, and it's not just a simple issue of individual rights.
In the societies of the future, in the cities of the future, I do not think it is possible that you can have absolute freedom. But I think we have to accept, to say 20 million people, if you want that city to work as an effective machine, which is really what we're talking about, every machine has to operate with the guidelines, or a computer has to have a program. I think we're going to have to accept in the future that people will have to be programmed a bit more if society is to be successful.
This is a vision of the future where the human bows to the machine. There is no talk here of computers that can free us. The language is more guttural. It is the sound of global business.
This is our most advanced factory to do this operation in terms of infrastructure and equipment. We have satellite links to Europe. To run such a plant like this, a high-technology plant, you don't need thousands of operators. You need qualified engineers. You know, in Singapore, there's a shortage of labor, so it's no problem to lay off people or not employ people, you know. Actually, the government is happy if you don't need too many people.
In a country where there is too much work, there is a need for foreign labor. So every day, there's a steady flow, carefully controlled, of migrants brought to do menial tasks and then, ungraciously, sent home.
Well, the greatest advantage in being a city-state is that we are able to maintain some control over the movement of peoples. If you go to most countries in the third world, cities are ballooning in a very nasty and unpleasant way. The urban drift is unstoppable, which means you cannot solve problems of crime, of drug addiction, traffic jams, prostitution, and so on. So, by historical accident, we are a city region with a fence around it. Of course, the gates are open, but we control what goes through the gates.
In Singapore, they have embraced the future, but they are not starry-eyed. They have built themselves a high-tech wall to keep the poor at bay and to keep their wealth inside. In the world of city-states, the dividing lines are clear between who is in and who is out, between the ones who taste the future now and those who have to wait their turn.
The movement of peoples will be one of the biggest problems in the next century. It will be one of the big themes in the next phase of human history. This new technology, this globalization we're talking about, means greater difficulty in controlling infections and contaminations from outside. So increasingly, the defenses have to be within. defenses in depth and defenses in the very organs of itself. Singapore can offer some insights into how these challenges can be responded to in the next century. Not so much Singapore in itself as a unique case, but Singapore as one of many cities in East Asia, all conducting their own social experiments, if you can put it that way, in how to organize society, in how to optimize their economic advantages in the face of these new technologies. The way to the future is not the past, and I don't think that existing methods of constructing democracy or socialism would serve us well in the years to come.
Singapore struck me as a culture in which, as William Burroughs once said about the United States in the 50s, everyone has the policeman inside. There isn't a big police presence on the street in Singapore, but the populace behaves itself. It is a future. It's one of those futures that's sort of fallen to earth a bit sooner than everyone else's. It's like Disneyland with death penalties. And I hope that isn't the future we're headed toward. I don't think the future is about control from the top. I think what we have to worry about is control from within.
New citadels are looming out of the haze that is the future. They form at the intersections where information meets. The information superhighway is a shortcut past the slums, a speedy route to paradise for those already on the move.
Globalization is not everywhere. The globalization is a business today primarily of cities. Globalization does not take care of Africa, does not take care of the peasants in Latin America, does not take care of Uzbeks in Uzbekistan. Globalization takes care, for instance, of the small minority in Sao Paulo, who is as rich as the small minority of city in London. Then globalization takes care also in Sao Paulo, but not of the rest.
The greatest test of any future really worth creating is not whether it can give us a computer in every home, a mobile phone of our very own, or free access to the information age. It is where it can, in some small way, lift our oldest burden, the crushing force of poverty, the dead weight of exclusion.
Well, we are going to see the emergence at global level of a kind of archipelago. Archipelagos are the most powerful cities. And this archipelago of the best developed and rich cities will be surrounded by an ocean of poverty, an ocean of excluded people. The problem is technology going to be used to reimburse the tendency? Is technology to eliminate, reduce the archipelago and make a kind of a community at world level? This is a big question for the future.
At this moment, when we are telling ourselves technology can bring us together, it is technology that is driving us more hopelessly apart.
So this is a world made for a very fortunate few. The people who are called these days the symbolic analysts, who can work with numbers and ideas and things, and who live in little leafy, isolated suburbs surrounded by high, spiked gates and guards, who sit there with their little computers and their telephones and deal with ideas and information all over the world. And they don't venture downtown, and they don't use the public transport, and when they do travel, it's in the front parts of international airplanes. And they'll have a nice life, a busy life, but a rich life. And then there'll be the rest who don't have access to technology, who don't know how to use it, who don't know how to make products out of it, who don't know how to find customers. And they live downtown, and they'll use public transport. And they'll have a tough time. And this is the underclass. And unless we can raise them to be symbolic analysts, and that's a tough job, we're going to have a very divided society, with the rich feeling very rich, but not prepared to pay taxes to help the very poor because they don't meet the very poor. They live in two different worlds.
I think the facilities offered by technology in the future is really going to fragment the cohesiveness of society. People won't have to communicate on a face-to-face. They won't have to shake hands. They won't actually have to work together, travel together, be together. Technology will allow them to conduct their business at arm's length. Technology will also allow them, with physical security, to live in an environment which is uncluttered by the outside world, by violence, by crime, by pollution perhaps, and therefore they can live within a cocoon.
This is Kensington Green. I'm the estate manager, and this is a new luxury development in Kensington. The idea of Kensington Green is that security is of the most importance. All the boundary areas are covered by 24-hour surveillance cameras. Each house on the development is fitted with a burglar alarm. These alarms are radio controlled. Situated in the car park are a number of sensors, infrared and microwave, which activate a number of cameras. We've got video entry system. It works on the same principle. When somebody rings the doorbell, they get a picture and also can speak to the visitor. When a resident arrives outside the apartment blocks, they use a swipe card and they each have their own 4-pin access code number. When the swipe card is put into the reader, back at the security lodge, information is relayed back to the computer. And that basically tells them who the resident is, what day it is, what time it is, and indeed of what apartment block they're at.
No, that seems to be probably the children playing about in the garages we get from time to time.
Well, security is the #1 reason why people have decided to live on this development, and it's extremely important. But what we try and do is not make that an overpowering presence. Basically, at the end of the day, residents should feel this is their home, where they have chose to live, but there is a very secure environment.
people who are actually making things happen will become more and more isolated. I mean, if they start to feel that there are areas where they shouldn't go, where they shouldn't work, through which they should not travel, then again that perception grows, that they have to keep themselves within an island. They have to keep themselves within their own group. They have to communicate, play, work within a group that they feel comfortable with. And there are other groups, other communities that they actually back off from. I think that is when we're in a really dangerous situation.
We have come to this. Technology designed to set us free, to give a window on the world, has erected bars before that window and closed us in on ourselves. The information revolution promised us greater knowledge, but instead it makes us ignorant, insular, and scared.
People are wanting to live in communities with people just like them. So they get up in the morning and they feel okay because they see somebody just like them. And it's a tiny bit worrisome. There's very little mixing. It's people like us that people want to hang out with. And I think that's because the world out there is getting shakier and shakier, and kind of the only place that we can be assured where everything is kind of going to go okay is at home. And that's a very dangerous place for a society to be, because it's not observing what's happening in the outside world, which it's not giving them a broad view. They just go deeper and deeper into that computer. Someone once said to me, how can you go so deep into the computer when that screen is so narrow?
In a crowded and confusing world, we use machines to give us distance, to build a fence around ourselves. Sometimes that fence is real, a wall of electronic eyes, and sometimes it is virtual. It goes right inside our minds. But it is all a form of hiding. Computers reach their final goal when they totally disconnect us and remove us from what is real.
In about the first decade of the new century, we will have a transition from the information society to the experience society. It will be about being there. Virtual reality will probably become a key technology, and it will happen like this. Instead of buying a television set, a camcorder, a computer, and a telephone, you will buy a terminal, and that terminal will integrate all of those capabilities together. And key to that will be a VR ability. Then you will be able to enter the computer-generated world. We will be able to have new experiences and be places we've never been before.
When I think about technology, like affecting us personally, I think about my friends that sit home and play Nintendo and turn that on and their brains go off. And I think of people that, you know, that are like obsessed with virtual reality and like spend all their money going to Action Park to like, you know, do a flight simulator, you know, Air Force ride or whatever, and that kind of stuff. We don't need that, you know. We need to read. We need to like, you know, to develop children's imaginations, you know, from their own head, not from CD-ROM, you know, not from how good the graphics are, but it's about, you know, your mind. And like I think that, you know, it's dangerous. It's a fine line, because as much as education can advance, it's like it still makes us very, very programmed, you know?
My brother is so warped out. I mean, he sits there and he plays Mortal Kombat all day. I mean, he goes outside and stuff. And when he goes outside, he gets into trouble. But when he comes home, I rarely see him pick up a book. I mean, he used to read, but now he just likes to play, you know, Star Trek Next Generation, and he just sits there all day. And how can I help him? How can I take him away from this when all he wants to do is just play this stuff, you know? It's like an addiction.
When virtual reality comes, people that don't have great lives may do what we're calling cyber suicide. Cyber suicide is where you go in and you decide not to come back, because in there is a much nicer place than out here, and it here becomes worse and worse the more that people aren't involved with real life, and cyber life becomes so pleasant. And after all, it's man/woman made, and it can be anything we want it to be. And you don't get rejected in cyber world.
I wonder what my grandfather or my father, who's no longer living, would make of the world we live in today. I think they might see it as a sort of screaming dystopia, really quite a nightmarish place. And people often say, well, look at television. What will virtual reality do to us? And I say, well, we don't know what television's done to us. It's very difficult to imagine a world without it.
Technology has made the world small. It has brought its darkest corners and laid them out before us. But the light that it offers to fill that dark with hope is just the flickering of a screen, of no use beyond itself.
I like the way things are now a great deal. It's not perfect, but such an alteration in how we meet other people, how we exchange goods. We could lose some of the positive things about today's society. And so I do worry about, will the system be almost too appealing? Will it erode local communities in a way that we might miss something? On the other hand, I think you've got to be optimistic that if you believe in human potential, that giving people a tool like this just unleashes capabilities that have never been used before.
I'm hopeful, or I'm stupid. Now, I'm very hopeful about the next 20 years because I think that people, the ultimate hope is in people. And I don't believe that people are going to let the machines overrun them. I think people instinctively know their futures are a little bit flimsy or shaky and are going to take care of it. I think they're going to take care of it by instilling values into their children, by electing the right people, by rising them above their prejudices. I think they'll throw the parts of tech that are bad and invasive and destructive and stupid out and take the parts that are good. I still believe that it's our instinctive desire to save our own race and do the best thing. And I think that we will.
Technology does not give us what we know we really need. It does not make us feel more human or give us understanding. It does not ask us to stop and pause when we see those we know are struggling. In the embers of the century, we are drawn to a glow. We crave the white heat of technology, while our hearts are growing cold.
I think it could be a disaster scenario as this new technology comes to its fruition, with fewer people getting richer and more people getting poorer. And I think it could mean the collapse of societies and indeed the collapse of the world civilization and a new dark age. And the only thing that I think in the end can save that is if the people who master this technology, the new rich, the new intelligentsia, can actually think beyond themselves. If they can realize that the best form of selfishness is unselfishness, that if they don't actually invest in people other than themselves, beyond themselves, they will destroy themselves.
Thankfully, some notes of optimism there on an otherwise unsettling view of the future. That was the final episode in the series Visions of Heaven and Hell, produced by Britain's Channel 4, and I hope you enjoyed it. Next week on Compass, is there a place for ritual in today's society? Traditional Aboriginal society puts its young men through an initiation ceremony that makes them men. Could a return to a more traditional way of life that's expressed such a ritual be the answer for our troubled youth?
I'm not feeling too functional, and that's sort of what's led me to consider this burial.
It creates a place in which the initiate realises in reality that they are much more vast than anything that their consciousness can conceive of.
That's Rites of Passage, next Sunday night on Compass. Until then, good night.
On Four Corners.
We have fast food, we have fast cars, fast technology, and we want fast sex.
One of the fastest selling pills in history.
I suppose I'm going to be a regular customer.
But are we being told the costs?
There's already been a death in Australia.
The quick fix that's got everyone talking.
Yeah, it's great.
Viagra, the naked truth. Four Corners, 8:30 Monday.
News Radio keeps you in touch. Hear news as it happens at home and overseas. You never have to wait long for the headlines or the latest weather, the fastest sports results. There's comprehensive finance coverage of the Australian and global markets. Stay ahead of the political game. Hear the decision makers live from Federal Parliament. News Radio is the national network for busy people, delivering information you need to know when you need to know it. ABC News Radio. More news, more often.